Hello, early birds, or those who are listening on the replay. We'll be starting here in about 4 or 5 minutes. So this is the opportunity as you get into the classroom. Let me know you're on board. And if you have specific questions about last week's homework assignment or last week's work, and we'll be moving into this third week, actually. Pre-work is 1 week. Week 1 is characterization and openings. Lots of juicy information there. And then we're going to go into week 2, which is the beginning of your story journey. Hey, Beth Ann, nice to see you. Oh, it's snowing now in those mountains. And from Denver with also her blanket of snow. I love you guys, but you can keep the snow. 3 to 5 inches there in Arizona. And then we have from Nashville. Yay, that's Hope. Good. Hope, I just had run across your postings. I know you posted them 13 hours ago, but I just got to them this morning. And so I'm going to review those in today's class, if that's okay with you. If not, go ahead and say, no, Mary, I prefer that you don't use my examples. But I think there's information there that will help everyone. Oh, thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. Sometimes it's easier to talk through the nuances than for me to type a lot and then wonder if I'm still on track. So Louise has 2 to 4 inches for Denver. I'm assuming that some of that is the residual off of the California deluge that they've been living through for the last week, that you don't see much of it on the news anymore. But that was pretty dramatic. We get atmospheric rivers through here, and when we do, it's hunker down and bring out the kayaks. "62 degrees in Nashville." I may have to answer your questions in person, Hope, and head to Nashville where it's warmer than it is here. You might even get to 50 today. Yay! I know where it's snowing, it's going to be in the 30 degrees in order to make that rain into snow. But in the 40s is still chills my bones. Okay, I'm going to answer a question for Helen here. She's not yet in the classroom. She has another event and she'll be coming in. So when she does come in, then I will address one of her questions that I want to make. Vivian says anything under 80, and she puts on a sweatshirt. Where I live, we know who the tourists are in the summer because they're wearing parkas and walking around in blankets, basically, thinking that, well, it's summer, it should be warm, but we're literally just off the ocean. So It's called temperate, which means it doesn't go very high, but it doesn't go very low either, usually. Okay, I'm going to bring up, Hope very graciously agreed to let me go over her homework here that she posted on the Facebook, and I hadn't gotten to yet until this morning. So I printed it off and asked her if it was okay, and she said yes. So I wanted to go, hello, Jan, nice to see you there. Hope's first exercise 1. She states, I'm writing a contemporary romance about a heroine and hero. So it's clearly a romance. It's not with romantic elements. The heroine, a merger and acquisition attorney, wants to earn the $1 million bonus by managing the successful takeover of a tech company owned by the hero to prevent her deceased father's charity that supports military families from closing. The hero wants to prevent the heroine from taking over the tech company he and his deceased brother created, and he wants to keep it as a legacy in memory of his brothers. So those are external goals. Now, here's the challenge here, though. She thinks she has a template 2. And I want you to look in the movies that we used for this course that we analyzed. We have Hitch, which is level 1 for both characters, True Lies, which is level 1 for her, but level 2 for him, Aeon Flux, which is level 2 for both, Princess Bride, a level 1 for her and level 2 for him. And the other 2, How Stella Got Her Groove Back and Must Love Dogs, are both level 1. Now, here's the secret about what level it is. You have a level 2 when the external goal requires so much airspace and something bad is going to happen unless they pay attention to that external story goal. So that's in True Lies. The Arnold Schwarzenegger character, there's a terrorist threat against the US. If he doesn't pay attention to that, they could strike, and who knows, hundreds of thousands could be hurt. In Aeon Flux, the level 2 aspect is that both characters know if they do not survive and stop the cloning, that the civilization that they know, the survivors of a catastrophe from years before, may be destroyed. In Princess Bride, the princess has a level 1. She doesn't really have any goal per se. She's just going to go along and marry Prince Humperdinck. But the hero is a level 2 because he realizes that Prince Humperdinck is not the person who he portrays himself to the public. And if he goes ahead and marries her, not only is she in danger, but others are also going to be in danger. And at one point in the story, Prince Humperdinck actually says to his henchman that it was brilliant of him to come up with marrying her because everybody loves her. And it gives him a cover to get ready to take over the neighboring kingdom. And he plans to kill her as the justification of why he gets to invade the neighboring kingdom. So there's a life or death situation there. Not to her, from her point of view, but from the hero's point of view. He understands that Humperdinck is not what his PR people show to the world. So, Hope, in yours, yes, you have external goals. And most romances have an external goal. Save the bookstore, get the job that they want, take care of an aging parent, whatever it is. But those are not necessarily life or death. So yours is actually still a level 1. And the level 1 templates, what they do is keep your eyes on the romance. Whereas if you're writing something like with romantic suspense or a thriller or some futuristic stories or a mystery where the eyes have to be on that external potential threat as well as the romance. So the questions asked in a level 2 are not going to apply to what you are writing here. Yes, she has a goal, but it's not going to be, if she doesn't get it, life or death. And if he doesn't get it, it's his goal. It's not going to be life or death. Does that make sense to you? I'm very impressed with how many people, usually this is a bigger issue for a lot of people, but so I'm glad you gave me an excuse to raise the issue in case you're writing something at a later date. But does it track that why you are writing? Yes. Okay, good. She got that. But it was an opportunity to let everybody know what that difference is. Okay, then we go into belief system. The heroine's belief system: if I fall in love, then I will have to sacrifice the $1 million bonus I need to save my deceased father's charity to support military veterans and their families from closing. Hero: if I fall in love, then I will have to sacrifice my pledge to honor the legacy of my deceased brother by preventing the takeover of our tech company. Now, here again, there's a little bit of a nuance about this love. As written by you, it is very specific to what they are doing right now. So in that case, going back to, if it wasn't a situation where he wins, she loses, the love has to do more with what has held her up to this point from falling in love, not just with him, but with anybody. And if she had fallen in love with somebody, where was the hiccup that created them not taking it any further? So if you look at, and there's some really good examples posted in the Facebook group, the love has to do with what are they afraid of? For her, she's afraid of not succeeding on this as a businesswoman, because she knows it will, if I fall in love, then it will divide my attention away from my business goals. You see, that's much more general, and that's going to keep her from growing and changing as a character. For him, if I fall in love, then I can, let's see. He's afraid of not adhering to his pledge to his brother. So if he falls in love, then he fears he will fail the pledge to his brother, or he will fail to his deceased brother's dreams. So it's their dream. There's a family. If I am too busy falling in love with this particular woman, or any woman, I may not be able to follow through on the pledge to my brother. You see, that's much more in general. So even if it wasn't her and him, it would be any woman at this time in his life, that he's been driving himself because of this pledge to his brother. And for her, she has, okay, Helen, you just came in. Good. What we're talking about is, I'm going over Hope's homework that she had posted on the Facebook, but I hadn't gotten to it yet. So that's why I'm reading the belief systems here and why there might be speed bumps that are built into it. Hope for you, it's like you focused in too close to why I can't love him from both her point of view and his point of view. And what I'm saying is, in order to use the concepts of the belief about love, you have to, yes, it has to focus in on why this particular potential lover is going to be really problematic. But you want to think of it from a little more distance. It's not just about right now. It's been what has kept them from loving, what has kept them from a commitment. So when you're answering that question, you want to give that a little bit more, just kind of you don't want it vague. You want it specific to that character, whether they were in the particular situation they're at or in a different situation. It's kept them from remaining single. It's kept them focused on something else in their life. Okay, does that make a little more sense, Helen? Or sorry, Helen, I've got something about your question too in a minute. Okay, Hope, are you still with us? Okay, Helen says, or Hope, just because both of you have names start with H, I screw it up. In my story, the hero is afraid of love, of being hurt again, because, and again, it is not necessarily, yes, she reminds him of the future love, but previous love, but what was it that happened with that relationship? Was it because the previous person was very focused on their career goals? Or do you see, why is it what you're saying as written? In my story, the hero is afraid of love being hurt again because the heroine reminds him of a previous bad romance. Well, what is it that she reminds him of? What particular issue is it that he's afraid to get involved with? Is it if there was somebody else that came in and he was attracted to her, would somebody else he not have an issue with? So that's what we're trying to look at here. Be more specific. You're thinking so close about the external goals, but you're not thinking about what up to this point in their life has kept this person back from loving. And it sounds like the hero in your story, he was able to love, but it didn't work out. And my question is why? Because it's that issue. Because his previous relationship, she was driven in her job, because she was very forthright. Whatever that issue is, that's what's holding him back. Because as phrased, you're just saying she specifically is not going to work for him. Okay, Hope got that. And here's why that matters. Because he walks in, this is him walking in, and meets her and is attracted. But then he has this reason, this kind of hump that he's got to get over. Nope, he's got to get over the hump. And that hump, which is the belief system, if it's just because what you describe reminds her of somebody else, the more he gets to know her in the story, the easier this disappears and he can get together with her, even though he's been burned in the past. So this is why just a little more digging down into what is it that's holding him back is going to make a difference. The third part here of Hope's question or answers, the heroine sees herself as decisive. But then you got a little bit more words can get you in trouble here. So decisive, some see that it inspires confidence, and she is, once committed, is able to follow through. Then you go into how others may perceive her as stubborn and arrogant, believing she doesn't give adequate thought to all possibilities or doesn't value their opinion. They might find her too rigid or too flexible, wishing she would be more open to other ideas or spontaneous experiences. They could admire her for her clear, decisive leadership and confidence. However, they might also find her approach too authoritative or feel that her decisiveness borders on being dictatorial, potentially causing resentment in a team environment. Now, if you're doing a employee evaluation, this is wonderful. But as far as the story's going, you've got so much, could be this, could be that, could be this, could be that, for just one trait. And you've got 2 more traits to go through with her, that it can get muddled to the reader. So it's about going in and saying, decisive, some see it as having confident, commits to course action, which should go full steam ahead. And then the opposite side, she might be sometimes seen as stubborn and arrogant. Those are 2 different traits. Doesn't value opinion, doesn't give adequate thoughts, too rigid, too inflexible, not spontaneous, not open to other ideas. Do you see how many things you've got in here? So it's too much for you in a book that you haven't written yet to look at all these things. But the more you can streamline it, the easier it is to see what type of situations in the story are going to be problematic for her and how is she going to be forced to grow and change. Same with clever. Is clever, used her cleverness to reach an end goal, knows precisely what she wants. That's 3 so far. Determined to succeed, good at reading people, quickly determines who to pick on, who to avoid. Okay, that's 6 right there. This is where too much information, why I asked you to kind of tighten in which of those specifically are the other characters seeing about her. Then you go, others may feel manipulated, unsure about her intentions, overshadowed, being used as a pawn, manipulative, again, cunning, cautious, believing. Okay, a lot of stuff going on there. So get down, go. This is bullet point answers is all you need, because the bullet point answers mean as you go deeper into the story, as you're writing it, you're going to see, oh, this is going to challenge her. Whereas something else is not. She's just going to be, it's going to be fine with her. Whereas, this is the type of situation that might force her to grow a little bit. Hope asked if there are 3 other characters in the story, won't they see the trait differently? Yes. Then that's the case. No way for me to know that from the answer. Go ahead and say, love interest can see these traits, this and this and this. Character number 2 can see it as this and this and this. But we're not getting this smorgasbord of possibilities from the same. And with 3 other characters in the story, if you're writing a romance, it mostly matters what the love interest sees. But we're not trying to throw the reader. The whole reason we do these traits is so at the end of the story, Hope doesn't necessarily change dramatically, as in she's no longer driven or she's no longer intuitive about other people. She's no longer decisive. She stays the same. It is the other characters that start seeing these traits in a different way. So unless the other 2 characters, if they only see one trait or one of the 3, then they're going to react in a different way. They don't have to react as much as the love interest does. Louise points out in the template, it says to name the characters who sees these characters. And that was helpful for her to see, okay, love interest, whatever their name is, sees it this and this. And if the reader can understand that it's a flip side of the same trait, not a different trait, not an opposite trait, the flip side of the same trait. But as written, you've got so many descriptions that it can be very hard to see. Hope says, in my original notes, I had the love interest seeing her one way, her coworkers saw something else, and her friends saw something else. And that's fine, because that oftentimes the love interest might learn from some of the other people around who see the traits from a different perspective. And that's the way it happens in real life, is that we meet someone, we come up with our judgment call in the sense of they're too picky or they're way too high maintenance, without getting. And the more they get to know them, but also the more they hear from other people, they're going to start shifting their point of view. Yes, they still may remain high maintenance, but there's a reason for it. Well, Hope, in the homework assignment, I did not say do that by other characters, but in the templates themselves where this question is pulled out of, that's where Louise saw the intention of it. And I apologize for that. But I was just hoping to, by doing it down to one character, one thing. But if you want to do 2 additional characters, make it clear. This is the mother. This is the former girlfriend. This is whatever it is that is giving that homework. It lets me see, is this going to add, coming from that person, are they going to force this character to grow, or is this character just going to blow it off because of who they are, type of thing? And I will put that in the future homework to make it easier. Because on the templates, which I'm hoping people are already moving into the templates because we are into our week 2 of class this coming week. But if you looked at the templates, I don't know which one it is particular, but it does mention them, that by using the names of the other people, it can help. Now, telling me someone's name is not going to help me as the instructor because I don't know who that person is in your story. So if you give them by their title or their story role, that is helpful to me. Okay, any questions from anybody else about what I just went through? And hope, even if you name them, tighten it up. Because again, each characteristics, you're giving 5 or 6 variations on what that characteristic is and 5 or 6 characterizations of how others might see it. So using a different character role in there, that can help make it clearer. But as it is, it's there's just too much information. And I strongly recommend looking through other people's postings in the group, because you'll see when people start going to even 2, they are this and that. It's like, which one matters the most? And you'll see how winnowing it down, because that trait is what's going to give you the roadmap toward writing your character, so that your character doesn't waffle all over the story and the reader is lost as to, well, I thought her trait was X, but now it's Y. So why did it change? And that's what happens when you get too much information. Helen says, I'm finding as I work through the templates, I keep changing my ideas about the characters. Is this usual? Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that you do, though, is then go back to your answers, your previous answers, because the answers you give at the beginning in the A and B template, in template 1 through 5, they're all going to play out later in the story. So this is almost like a brainstorming session here as you get clarity about who your character is. Now, if you, and I have had people wait at the end of the story, all of a sudden the character is not dealing with the issue that they were afraid of, or that their belief system challenged them to grow and find. At the end, it became something very different. And you know what? You can do that. The templates are for you. So if there's something that you don't know or aren't clear about, make it in all caps, unclear yet, or revisit. Because I promise you, I'm not coming after anybody to see if every single answer is. What they do, though, is get you focused in, and you start thinking about, oh, what about this? How is this going to play out in the story? Helen, particularly when we're used to being pantsters and we just write and then something happens, and then we write and then something happens. We're not being consistent with our characters, and the reader can see that. It's like if you said their fear is fear of commitment, but later on it's fear of intimacy or whatever it is. So as you get through the templates, if you realize you're changing something, just go back to earlier ones and make sure you're consistent. Does that help a little bit there? That's a great question because it happens a lot. Beth Ann, would you please discuss the ticking clock? Okay, I'll do that in 1 second because there was another question that was posted that I want to clarify from online. That's not the question. Helen gave this question. If a character doesn't change much during the course of the story, can they still be a point of view character? Now, I think I read that wrong, and I gave an answer to you, Helen, as if you were talking about your two main characters only. But the answer is the only character that has to show growth and change in the story is the main character. So if you look again at the movies, if you look at Princess Bride, she, as a character, does not change throughout the course of the story. She's a point of view character. She doesn't change. There are, if you have secondary characters who are points of view, they don't have to change. In fact, they shouldn't, because the only one you really want to show growth and change in is that main character. If you have a main character and their love interest, you can have both of them change, and you will see that in True Lies. She changes in the sense that she understands she is of value, where she didn't feel that way at the beginning of the story. In the movie Hitch, both characters are afraid of love, but for different reasons. And both change and grow over the course of the story. So does that make a little more sense to you, Helen? That it's a great question, because it has nothing to do with their point of view. It has to do with their role in the story. And if you want them, you're not going to have a secondary character. They may like apologize at the end of the story, or they may say, I was wrong. But you're not, the story is not about them. And so keeping the focus on who changes and grows makes that work better. Okay, back to Beth Ann's question about the ticking clock. The ticking clock is just something that alerts the reader to the fact that something's going to happen sooner rather than later. If you read a story from this up until about the 1980s, you often didn't have a ticking clock. Sometimes there was one, but not always. But it is that sense that the reader knows this development is not going to go on indefinitely. Something's going to happen. So if you meet with someone for lunch, but you know you have another meeting in an hour, what happens at that lunch is going to be impacted by the fact that if you have something to say to the other person, you're going to say it. And the viewer or the reader is going to know it's going to happen soon, because that clock is ticking. It's that sense of it's going to happen now. But if it's, oh, we don't have to meet today, we can meet next week, or how about next month, or then what happens is the tension decreases in your story. And that sense that something's going to happen now or soon goes away. And then as the reader starts feeling like it's just not, they're just ambling along. Helen says the bomb is set to go off in one hour. Yes, that does that. And that's why when you're writing something like a mystery or a thriller or a suspense, or certain types of fantasy stories, that's invaluable, because it's like, it reminds the reader that things are not just going to meander. If in Princess Bride, if Wesley, the hero, comes back, he comes back because we know that she's going to be married. And it gets moved up so that she's going to be married soon, not 6 months from now. If he had 6 months from now, he did not have to go through some of the things that he went through. If it was 6 months from now, she could probably walk away from it easier. But given that it's now, soon, it changes, and the reader knows that something's going to be happening. I don't know if any of you have watched the movie Willow. Not a romance, strong romantic elements, and there's a romance in the subplot of the story. But Willow, the main character, has to leave the village with a daikini, a human baby, to get her back to other humans. So he leaves the village to do this with his group of people with him. Well, from his point of view, he's doing it now because he doesn't want his wife to fall in love anymore with this little child. But from the viewer or the reader's point of view, we already know who this child is, and that somebody is actively looking for her to kill her and kill anybody who is helping her. So that is the ticking bomb, is we know he's got to protect her now. Does that help a little bit? And again, it doesn't have to be that life or death. It's someone is going to be announced to get the part in the play by this afternoon or by the end tomorrow. So it just keeps the character, and thus the reader, aware that things are moving along. I often describe it as, if you have ever, when we go to a fancy restaurant, sit down, we don't expect food in 10 minutes. We don't expect to be done with the meal in 30 minutes. We know, given the context, that it may take a lot longer to eat. But if you go to a fast food restaurant, drive up, that type of thing, if you sit there for 5 or 10 minutes, you start feeling, what's going on? Come on, let's go. And it's because of the context, because we've been trained that that's going to go quickly, and this is supposed to take longer. So if you're waiting at the 20 minutes in the drive out and you've already ordered, that can drive people up the wall, particularly if you have hungry kids in the car. But it has to do with that ticking clock. This place, we have a ticking clock, and we've trained to expect these food in this kind of time period. And that place has a different expectation. So if it's 20 minutes before the food is served, that's because you're in a place that assumes you want that kind of time before you start eating. In spite of all those pictures of the cooks in the back room racing to get everything done. Helen says it adds urgency. In certain stories, it adds urgency, but not all stories require the same level of urgency. Beth Ann says, I'm hearing there can be several ticking clocks at different times during the story, but there is one big one. The others may just be small ones for the scene, are not what the template is getting out. Is that correct? Yes and no. And no, because some stories don't have a sense of immediate overall story ticking clock. I'm thinking of something like Pride and Prejudice. There is no pressure, and you go through several seasons in that story where you're meeting and you're getting to know each other little by little. So there's no sense that there is a big ticking clock, that there has to be a decision. Is she going to fall in love, or is she going to marry, or is she going to whatever it is? That's not, there's no big external story goal. But if you're doing something that is again, mystery, you want to find that killer. That's the ticking clock. That's the external story goal. And it's always brought up multiple times during the story. You want to find that killer before they kill again. Same with a thriller, only there's a much stronger, and you get it throughout the story. They've already killed 2 people, or they've stolen this and they've stolen that. If they steal the next one, there's going to be something bad happening. So those, yes, have a big ticking clock in the story. But not all stories are going to be that way. In your story, Beth Ann, you have a war environment. So you would probably have a lot of little ticking clocks that the reader knows the larger context, maybe not the details, but they know the Germans are coming, or the Germans have been there, but the Russians are now going to start advancing, and life is going to be changing here because of the time frame, but they may not know the specific details. So you have small ticking clocks. This mission, we can push the front line forward. We want to push the Germans to this point within a week in order to position the army to move forward and get into Berlin. If they can get into Berlin, they can take over Berlin and expand the Soviet sphere of influence. Stalin knew what he was doing there. But so there were a lot of small ticking clocks that can come up. But it's not every story has a big story ticking clock going on. It was a great question. Okay, I want to go kind of quick. This coming week, you'll be looking at week 2 templates and lectures. And that includes template. You've done template 1, the opening of your story, and template 2, the inciting incident. Those are usually happening very close together in the beginning of a story. The shorter your story, the shorter the time frame that those things, and the inciting incident can actually occur without your character being aware that this is going to play out in the story. But the minute you raise an inciting incident, the reader should have a sense that this is foreshadowing the possibility of something happening in the story. But in this next week templates, we're going through template 3, 4, and 5 for both levels. Now, 3, 4, and 5 are, here's the beginning of the story. Oops, let me do this here. Beginning of the story. Now, and the inciting incident is happening here. Now what you want to do is level 5 is a quarter of the way into your story. But at the time that you're finished with level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a specific action taken at template 5, you have set up. This is what the whole pillar of the rest of your story is going to be built on. So it's not just random things happening. It is, you spend the time to do the work in templates A, B, and 1 through 5, and the rest of your story tracks. It's so much easier to pull it together because you know exactly what type of situation your character is going to be challenged by. You know, why was it hard to take this action at template 5? And yet they're going to have to revisit that in the middle of the story at template 8. And again, at the black moment, if you're writing romance, the climax, if you're writing something with strong romantic elements. And that's happening in both cases in template 10. But all the setup, it's kind of like if you're going to paint a room and you know you only have this much time, which in the book you have this much word count. Before you ever start, you get the paint, you get the brushes, you get the rollers, you get something if you put it on the floor, the tape if you're taping things off. And by doing that first up front, then it means that the 45 minutes you have left to do the painting is going to go quickly. But if you don't do that setup, if you don't do template 1 through 5, what happens is just like if you're painting and you've got the paint, but oh, you forgot the stir stick, and then you forgot the brush, and then you forgot I'm going to need a roller, then you forgot to put the covering on the floor. Each of those, pretty soon you're taking, you're a half an hour into your hour or 45 minutes into your hour, and you feel really pushed and rushed to do your job. And that's exactly what happens in a story. We're doing this setup so the reader understands who this character is and why in template 3, that pros and cons, this is where you're getting some of their backstory, not all of it, but just some of it. Because we're already engaged with the character by this point. We don't need that backstory up front. But we have to understand why this kind of situation is going to make them, is not necessarily easy for them to deal with. So that's where that template 3, should they act in template 5? Should they not act in template 5? So then we're going to go this week into template 6. And that is where we start learning about secondary storylines and subplots. I'm not going to go into a lot of clarification until you've listened to the lectures on it. But this is if you have a story with a strong or multiple secondary storylines, this is where the reader is open to shifting their attention over this way into this other character or this other situation that they're dealing with. Before that, if you shift that attention too much, we as writers might need a lot of that, but the reader doesn't. So that's why any editor and agent will tell you they know writers tend to start their story in the wrong places. Guilty. Because that's where we work out somewhat who this character is. And so that's why if you're a pantser, oftentimes you're going back and you're going to those particularly the first couple of chapters, and tightening, combining, or getting rid of them totally, because you find that, they work better later on in the story. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week. And we have homework for it. With sound. Oh, that's that. Okay, let me get the homework here. Okay, again. Helen, does that mean secondary stories can't be introduced before the first twist point? They can't be introduced, Helen. You have another character on scene or another relationship on scene, we see it. But you don't want to shift the attention too much on that story before the reader is engaged with the primary story. Again, as writers, we can be entranced by the shiny objects in front of us and go wandering off into this secondary storyline. And without realizing it, we've spent too much word count on that. And if you've ever watched the movie Casablanca, that is where they put so much in that opening of the story, who he is, what his ex-girlfriend was like, what's going on, all this stuff, comments from everybody, that it stopped. The reader hadn't engaged yet. It took a long time to get into it. And then at the end of the story, it got really rushed at the end as a result. So secondary stories, the characters can be introduced, get a little bit about them or what the problem might be between them and somebody else, but it's about the main characters. And it's kind of like going to a family reunion and you meet everybody that you've never met before, and you try to track where they are and who are they with and what this type of stuff is. And it can be brain draining because it's like, well, who's the person you really came there to meet? Why do they matter? And that's what you want to keep the tension on. Even if they don't get to meet that person, the reader knows this person is important to them and it's going to make a difference. Okay. The upcoming exercises in the first question is exercise 4. And where I pulled it out of was in template 2, so that you can refer to that template to see exactly what the context is for this. What is your inciting incident and what choice does it raise for your characters? Your main characters, not all your characters, your main characters, the point of view, main characters. That choice is going to be acted on in template 5 or a quarter of the way into your story. Now, most of you have given me your word count, and that word count matters because now it comes into play. You're doing 70,000 words, so 35,000 is roughly the midpoint, so that means about 16,000 is about a quarter of the way into the story. Doesn't happen to happen exactly on the 16,000 word count. It can happen a little before and a little after. But that's about where this action is going to take place. So that if you're not thinking, wait a second, my action that I'm going to have them take that's really going to get them going forward in their story journey, it's not going to happen until about 45% of the story. Then you know it's too long. You got to tighten up the beginning. So that's your first, is what is your inciting incident? And make sure it raises a question for the character. So you say, for this character, the inciting incident is this, and they're facing it at a quarter of the way into the story, template 5. If you're writing a romance and you've got one character coming from this direction and one character coming from that direction, once they both take an action around template 5, one might take it first and then the other one. But from that point on, when they hit the other templates, they're hitting them about the same time. Because they have, for whatever reason in your story, they are now working together. Not saying that they love each other, not saying they can even stand each other. They are simply, things are happening to them at the same time. If you are writing something with romantic elements, you're focusing on, in template 2, the external storyline. Are they going to take the mission? Are they going to take this particular case? Are they going to whatever? And then they deal with the romance. It's going to impact the romance. So just to be aware of this. This is one of the things that the reader knows. It's like I'm being shown how this inciting incident impacts the external storyline. But another one does the internal, and the internal is the love interest. So again, you can, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 4, 6, in the 6 movies, and there's a list of those movies under a header that basically says example of completed movies. You can look at those and see. Pay attention if you're writing the secondary to level 2, that those level 2 issues are going to be set up before anything is being impacted about the relationship. Next exercise, exercise 5, and this is based on template 4. Template 4 is to identify the mentor or mentors in your story. In template 3, if you've done a great job, it is it's like, if I move forward, bad things can happen. If I don't act, bad things can happen. And it can freeze a person. It happens that way in real life. Yes, I want this job, but if I take this job, I'm going to leave. And if I leave, it's going to impact all the people I love around here. So what happens is we bring in a mentor. And it can be somebody the character knows. It can be a total stranger to them. It can be a phrase that they read, or a casual comment made from somebody. So it can also be the memory that Granny used to say, pull up your big girl panties and act. Those are the types of things that can get and now the reader can understand why this person is going to do something that from the beginning of the story has looked to be very challenging. So they are going to help your character take a specific action in template 5. So they must appear before 5, before that template. They will come back again, the mentors, but they can be different mentors before template 8 and before template 10. But we pay a lot of attention in template 5 to them. And then exercise 6, based on template 5, what specific action does your character take 3/4 or a quarter of the way into the story that impacts the romance in at least small ways, begins to change the relationship? If you're writing a romantic element, it impacts the stop the threat, whatever it is, and look at how it's still going to impact the romance. And since we're looking at that romantic element, we want to keep that in mind. But your answer does not, first part of the answer can be about they take the job, they decide they're going to do something, but the action, did you hear my words? They're going to decide they're going to do something. That is part of that, but it is, they have to take the action. So I don't need to see they decided, because that sometimes tells me they were really not acting yet. They're still in the I'll think about it stage. So I'm looking specifically for the action that they take. The fact that they take a specific action tells me that they have decided. And then I want you to, in this particular template 5, label the choice. The choice is what they were considering in template 3. So you have your answers. The decision, and then the specific action taken. And by specific action, it means they enrolled in the class. They make it specific, because this is what the reader is looking for, not they're going to do something, but specifically what are they going to do? This is where you've set it up, that it's not necessarily easy, but they're going to do X. You definitely want that down there. And by labeling the choice, the decision, and the action, it can be easier to see if you stop at the decision level, or if your specific action is not clear to the reader. So that homework is in your template. There's quizzes, but there's also going to be the homework available in your actual templates for week 2. And I'll have Tech Guy to put it up on the Facebook group. Louise says, with the choice, do you want us to address the risks to the character? If you want to, that's great. It's not necessary, because my assumption is there is a risk here. Helen, any suggestions if we're not sure who our character's mentors are? Well, basically, you want to think, what does this character need to hear in order to take this action in template 5? And who is most likely to give it? And if it isn't someone who is close to them, oftentimes in a romance, it is the love interest that unintentionally gives them a reason. That's the mentor then. And it can be that he and she, or she and he, it's going to, sometimes it can be a dare, or it's, I'll bet you $50, or whatever it is. So even that can be a, whatever gets this character, the main character, from staying frozen and moving. And then you can see, okay, now I know what situation they have to face. So who is most likely to be the one they're going to hear something about that from, and will act on it? I have a middle child, and I know, based on long experience, if I say it's black, she's going to say it's white. Okay. So I learned a long time ago, if I say, if she wants to, but I want to do this. And we had a discussion once after high school. I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to go? What do you want to do? And it was like, I don't know. And I said, okay, if you did know what, then what would you want to do? And she said, I'd like to go to England and live and work for a while. Well, as a parent of a teenager, I'm going, okay, might not have been the first choice that I wanted for her. And so I said, I gave her my mentor role. I said, okay, but if in 3 months you haven't gone, then you start paying rent at home. That was her, what she needed. If I had said no, she definitely would have gone. If I said yes, she would have wondered, well, is this something mom wants me to do? And then, do I really want to do it? Or is it, am I doing it for mom? So you can get this mentor role in any way possible. Hope, I have a question about answer 2 and the which level of romance are you writing? It states, if you said yes for question 1, but most of your yeses are for questions 3 through 7, then you're most likely reading a level 2. Should it be if you said yes for questions 1 and 2, but most of your yeses are for 3 through 7, then you're most likely to. Again, Hope, you're looking at your particular story. When we came up with the templates and looked, and we went through, hundreds of movies that we analyzed. And what we found is it definitely, you needed question 1 as a yes. Question 2 could go either way. But question 3 through 7, it's most, if your yeses are 3 through 7, but not 1 or not 1 and 2, you're probably writing a level 1 story. So for some stories, your story, you could use it as question 1 and 2. But we left 2 as kind of a, could go either way. So that help a little bit. Setting up your homework. Thank you, Helen, for bringing that up. Or your one-on-one. Basically what we're doing is anytime between 10 a.m. Pacific West Coast time and 9 p.m. Pacific West Coast time, I'm available. And if you send me an email to my email address, mary@marybuckham.com, and say, give me some options. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday would be good days for me at around noon. Tell me what time zone it is that you're looking at. Because otherwise, I'll assume, if I don't know your time zone, I have to go on my time zone. And I'll pick one of those and I'll say, this works for me, but I do need your phone number. And I give you a call. So between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. And they last for about an hour. You don't have to do anything in advance except have gotten up through template 5 to understand what these concepts are, at least that far. And then we can brainstorm. We can brainstorm your current story. We can brainstorm a future story. We can brainstorm a series, or we can talk about some other aspect of writing. One other question I want to bring for you is that people asked if they could redo an assignment. Yes, absolutely. But I asked that you do the redo as exercise 3 redo. Totally different post, because I'm finding that I'm having to go through everybody's and finding things buried. So I have to go through every reply and comment, et cetera, to verify I haven't lost something. Jacqueline, I lost one of yours this week because I did not see that it was buried. And the more people post their homework, the more I give feedback, the longer these things get. So please start it as a fresh email. And try not to combine both your characters into one post, because again, it gets buried. And I'm going through original post, my reply, your reply, my reply, redo, my reply, redo, my reply, doubled. So I prefer more post, more specific, and I can find them easier. Helen said, you mean we should have completed template 5 before setting up the one-on-one? You should have at least listened to the lectures so you understand the concepts, Helen. So you don't have to go through them, but I think you'll be more prepared, because I'll be talking to you about template 5, template 8, and template 10. We don't go through everything, but those are the ones that we definitely touch base on. And again, if we're talking one character at the time, we can talk both characters. It's amazing what you can get done in an hour, but do them one at a time. So I'm not trying to keep track of, okay, this character is doing this and then we jump to that character, and then we jump back to this character, onto that character. It can muddle some of us, and I don't want to give you the wrong answers. So just an email to me, mary@marybuckham.com, and give me a couple options for dates and times, and I will get back to you. Give me your time zone and also a phone number to reach you. And then I can just confirm. So any other questions before we move forward? After you get through lecture 5 and start into template, you've done template 5, then you have a stronger idea of where your story is going and what's going on. And that's what we want to get you to. So thank you all. I know I ran over a little bit more, but there's been great questions, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your giving feedback to one another. And I'm running out here in a few minutes, but I will get back to the homework later today. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again next week.